Brambles are our next subject. Brambles are composed of raspberries and blackberries. They are self-fruitful, and so only one variety is needed for the plants to produce fruit. How do you tell the difference between the fruit of a blackberry and raspberry? Raspberry has a hollow fruit, but blackberry does not. When a raspberry is picked, the white receptacle remains on the plant, leaving the fruit hollow. With blackberries, the receptacle remains with the fruit. Also, raspberry drupelets are hairy, and blackberry drupelets are smooth. Brambles are perennial plants with biennial canes. In other words, though the plant lives for many years, each cane only lives for 2. The first year, the cane grows, but does not fruit. The second year, the cane fruits and then dies. However, each year the plant produces new canes, so each plant will have new canes and 1-year-old canes at the same time. The first-year canes are called primocanes. As I mentioned, these do not fruit. Primocanes become floricanes the second year. These canes fruit and then die. The photo below shows a young primocane coming up next to several floricanes. Brambles prefer a well-drained, sandy loam soil. That type of soil is rare in Kansas, so we need to improve our soils by adding organic matter. Add about 2 inches of organic matter to the row and till in before planting. It is best to avoid areas that have been planted in soil where potatoes, tomatoes, pepper, eggplant, or strawberries have been grown in the last several years, as these plants can pass on disease. However, if you have no choice and the plants mentioned above were healthy, you may use the same area. Raspberries are composed of black, purple, and red types. Purple raspberries are a result of a cross between the red and the black types. Black and purple raspberries do not sucker, but red raspberries do. When I say red raspberry sucker, I mean they send out new plants from the crown of the original plant. In other words, they spread and can be difficult to keep under control. Black and purple raspberries will produce several canes from each hill, but do not spread. Black and purple raspberries are tipped, but red raspberries are not. So what is tipping? Tipping is when you remove the top inch or so of growth. So why tip? Removing that growth causes the buds further down on the cane to start to grow and produce side branches. This results in having a shorter, bushier cane rather than a long, arching one. A shorter cane is less likely to flop when it's loaded down with fruit than a long one. Also, tipping results in an increase in yield. The following year's crop is primarily produced on buds on the side branches, not on the main one. The increase in yield caused by tipping is dramatic, often 3 to 5 times what would be produced without tipping. Different types of raspberries are tipped at different heights. Black raspberries are not as vigorous as reds or purples, and so are tipped at a lower height, often about 30 inches. Purple raspberries are tipped at a higher height, usually between 36 and 40 inches. Red raspberries are not tipped. Remember, red raspberries sucker and produce enough canes that tipping is not needed. Since red raspberries sucker, we have to be concerned with row width. Mowing is used to keep the row width between 18 and 24 inches. If the aisles in this photograph were not mowed, they would eventually completely fill with red raspberry canes that developed from those suckers. Another important cultural practice with raspberries is trellising. Heavy fruit loads can cause the raspberry canes to flop over into the aisle and get in your way. Not only is the fruit more likely to be damaged as you work with the plants, but it's also more difficult to harvest. Trellises for raspberries do not need to be as robust as that needed for grapes. A T-post with 2 wooden cross members may be all that is needed. Crimped cup holder hooks are placed on the ends of the cross member to support the wires. The height of the first cross member is 24 inches above soil level, and the second is 36 to 48 inches, depending on the vigor of the plants. The second photo shows a trellis system using rebar. The vertical piece is 1/2 inch rebar, and the cross piece is 3/8 inch. They are fastened together by welding. Pruning recommendations vary depending on the species of plant we are working with. Let's start with winter pruning of black and purple raspberries. These raspberries do not sucker and canes come from a crown. The first step is to remove the old floricanes. Remember, these will be dead since they have already borne fruit the previous season. It is quite easy to tell the difference between the dead canes and the live ones. The dead canes are a lighter color and are dry and therefore lack weight. Next, thin the remaining canes to 3 to 6 per plant. Choose the largest, healthiest canes to keep. The final step is to prune the side branches to 12 to 15 inches long. These side branches will produce the majority of the fruit. Red raspberries are pruned a bit differently than the blacks or purples because they sucker. The first step is to remove the old floor canes just like we did with other raspberries. Remember, the row needs to be kept at 18 to 24 inches wide, and so remove canes that are outside of this area. Within the row, keep a strong cane every 4 to 6 inches and head these back to 5 to 5.5 feet. Pruning out individual canes is not fun because you must reach into the row to prune out the canes you don't want. Pick a gold day where you have enough clothing that the thorns don't scratch the skin. Fortunately, there is a way we can avoid all of this. There are certain raspberries that are described as everbearing. These plants bear fruit on primocanes. In other words, they bear on the canes that came up that year. They are described as everbearing because they also bear on the floor canes. Therefore, each cane bears fruit twice, once on the primocanes and a second time the next year when the primocanes become floor canes. These everbearers are treated just like other red raspberries in that they are not tipped and the row is maintained at the same width, 18 to 24 inches wide. Even though a second harvest is possible in the spring, most growers prune all the canes back to the ground every year during the winter. The reason for this is that it makes pruning much simpler, as you can see here. There are a number of raspberries that do well under Kansas conditions. Recommended red raspberries include Latham, Reveille, and Titan. Reveille is almost thornless and so will be more comfortable to prune. Suggested black raspberries include Allen, Bristol, and Jewel. Remember, purple raspberries are a cross between red raspberries and black raspberries. Those that have done well for us are Royalty and Brandywine. We have had certain red and yellow everbearing raspberries for years, including Heritage, Fall Gold, and Goldie. Joan J. is a newer red raspberry that is thornless. The only black everbearing raspberry that I am familiar with is Niwot. Blackberries are composed of trailing and erect types. We can go either in Kansas, but trailing types are more popular because breeding programs have eliminated one of the most annoying characteristics of certain trailing cultivars. Certain erect cultivars, such as Shawnee, are thorny, which makes these varieties a challenge to work with. Breeders have been working with trailing types to make them semi-erect and thornless. Blackberry thorns are more prominent than those on raspberries. Notice that the thorns in the photo on the left often lean back into the plant. This means it is much easier to reach in with your hand than to pull out. Thornless types, on the other hand, are completely thornless. They have no thorns at all. Breeding programs are focused on thornless types to make them more upright and increase the quality and quantity of fruit. Another difference between erect and trailing types is that erect types produce many suckers, while trailing types produce few. However, trailing types will need more support to keep the fruit off the ground. Blackberries are a more robust plant than raspberries and therefore are tipped higher at 36 inches rather than 30. Just like the raspberries, the result is a stronger primocane causing side branches to develop and resulting in 3 to 5 times increase in yield. Tipping primocanes is vital if you want the most blackberry fruit possible. Trellising is also important with blackberries, especially with the trailing types. As with raspberries, T-posts can be used with 2 wooden cross members. The height of cross members are often set at 24 and 54 inches above the ground. The upper cross member is usually higher with blackberries than raspberries due to the more vigorous growth of the blackberry. However, there are differences among various blackberry varieties that may require height adjustments of the cross members. As you can see from the right photo, rebar can be used as well. Fruiting canes are removed any time from the end of harvest through the following winter. This photo shows the difference in appearance between a dead cane and one that is still alive. The dead cane is a light tan color and is to the right. Color isn't the only indication whether a cane is alive or dead. Shaking the canes will show that the dead cane is much lighter due to a lack of water. Flora canes are pruned back in the spring, usually in March. Pick out the strongest and the healthiest 5 to 7 canes. Remove all others and prune back the lateral branches on remaining canes to 14 to 16 inches. Recommended thornless semi-erect cultivars include Washita, Chester, Navajo, and Apache. All but Chester have come out of the breeding program at the University of Arkansas. These are all traditional blackberries. However, Everbearing Blackberries have been developed in the last few years and are increasing in popularity. This is a listing of Everbearing Blackberries. Remember that Everbearing plants bear fruit on first-year canes, the primo-canes. The first two developed were Prime Gem and Prime Jan. Both are thorny, with Prime Jan being the sweeter of the two. Primark 45 is a newer variety that is still thorny but has better flavor. Primark Freedom is my favorite because it is thornless, has excellent flavor, as well as excellent fruit size. However, it is not recommended for commercial growers because it does not ship well. The newest cultivar to be released from the University of Arkansas is Primark Traveler. The berries are smaller and the flavor not as good as Freedom, but it is thornless and does ship well. Just like Everbearing Raspberries, Everbearing Blackberries are most often pruned all the way to the ground in the winter. Though the spring crop is lost, the pruning is so much simpler that most gardeners think pruning to the ground is worth it. Well, that concludes our lesson on brambles.